Huh. This is interesting. They're remaking Legacy of Kain. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, 'tis I, Michael A. Grimm, aka the Multi-Voice. I have many voices, but one opinion. And today, I got something to announce, ladies and gentlemen. Rumor has it that they're going to be remaking the Legacy of Kain games. Now, I remember back in the 90s when I had, my PlayStation 1 and 2, I enjoyed playing Legacy of Kain. And I remember I didn't review it, my buddy Dracula did. He reviewed Legacy of Kain a long time ago. But right now I'm going to be revisiting it. And for those of you who don't know what it's all about, and if some of you think it's a Legacy, and you think it's Cain from the biblical era, you know, the one who killed Abel, no. It's about Cain the vampire. And here is the story. It all started out with one certain vampire who goes by the name Cain. Cain is a vampire. And his legacy started from the first sci-fi video, not sci-fi, but a fantasy vampire video game called Blood Omen. Now, they wanted to make like a Legend of Zelda fantasy-like video game, but have vampires in it and be rated M for mature. And in the game, you have Cain. He starts out as a noble knight in the beginning who gets kicked out of a bar. And from out of nowhere, he gets surrounded by a bunch of peasants. And it's the first time you play a character who just instantly gets killed in the game. And then there's the cutscene where a necromancer who is named Mortanius, he removed the sword that they impaled throughout his chest and gave him a vampire heart that is owned by Janos Aldrin, the first vampire in the game. And they they mention his name on Blood Omen, but he never appeared until another game which I'm going to mention. In the game, it turns out it's a medieval fantasy where it turns out there's a never-ending war between the humans and the vampires. And the human race started learning sorcery. They started learning sorcery, so pretty much they're dabbling into the dark arts of magic in order to wipe out the vampire race. And there's this one vampire named Vordor who just killed some of the people and cursed one of the noble knights who his soul is cursed in his armor for eternity. And of course, Cain, he's not exactly a complete good guy. He's more of the anti-hero. He kills bad people, but he also kills good people. And he had to guard the pillars of Nosgoth. Nosgoth is the land that they came from, where the whole fantasy takes place. And now, there's this girl who was the Balance Guardian. She gets killed. She gets murdered. So now Cain becomes the new Balance Guardian. Now, Cain didn't kill the girl. She just gets murdered by somebody else. But throughout the game, Cain starts realizing there's a lot of betrayal. At first, he thought he came to life for revenge for those who killed him. But it turns out there was more to it than that. And spoilers for those of you who played the game, who never played the game. At the end, you have two choices. You can either sacrifice yourself as Balance Guardian, and it will bring about the peace throughout the land of Nosgoth. But if you refuse a sacrifice and become master of the vampire race, you pretty much rule the land with your vampire army. And then after that game was over, it made some of the Legacy of Kain fans begging for more, so they decided to do a spin-off game where you don't play Kain, but you play Raziel. And the spin-off game is, of course, Soul Weaver. Now, unlike Legacy of Kain, where it's like overhead, it's straight up 3D puzzle game. I mean, you had to solve the puzzles everywhere you go. So, from the beginning, it picks up where Blood Omen left off, where Kain has a whole group of vampires who are like his sons. And there's this Raziel who starts out as a vampire. And, of course, it's supposed to be another year, so some of the vampires are going to evolve and have unique abilities and gifts from their evolution. But, surprisingly, Kain doesn't get evolved, but Raziel became the first. And what Kain did is he ripped the skeleton... I mean, Raziel, his evolution, he had wings. Bat-like wings on his back. And Kain walked up to Raziel and ripped the skeletal out of his wings. And therefore decided to toss him into the swirly waterfall of the abyss. Where, I mean, to vampires, water burns them like acid. So any vampire who threw into the abyss never comes back. So they tossed Raziel into the abyss, and he burned... I mean, he was burned and drowning in the swirling vortex until he becomes like what he looks like now. And some elder god, who turns out to be a giant squid, brought him to life, and he's no longer a vampire, but now becomes a Soul Weaver, a creature who doesn't live off blood, but lives off souls. So, Raziel wants his revenge for what Kain and his brethren did. So, in Soul Weaver, Raziel was going through his mission. He discovers that Kain destroyed his clan, his vampire clan that he had. And he discovered that all of his brothers was evolved after his death. Some of them have special abilities. So, Raziel kept killing every single one of his brothers and inherited their special abilities. I mean, Raziel can't... I mean, from the beginning, Raziel could... he can transport his body from both the material realm and the spectrum realm, where all the ghosts and souls are at. But, of course, he kills his one brother, who is a zombie, but his brother's ability can go through cages. So when he killed his brother, now he can go through cages. And also, he killed his other brother, who has spider-like ability, so now he can climb on walls. Killed another brother who can breathe underwater, so now he can breathe underwater. And so on and so forth, until he finally gets to Kain. And then, turns out that Kain starts altering... I mean, he has this room where it can take people at different time periods. So now Raziel starts following Kain through time. And then... that's when they decide, and that's when PlayStation 2 came out and decided to make sequels to Blood Omen and Soul Weaver. So therefore, they decided to do another side story for Kain in Blood Omen 2. On Blood Omen 2, it looks like he had other vampires who claimed their allegiance to him before Raziel and the others. But one of the Sarafan, that's the humans who has sorcerer ability, turns out they started becoming like these demon creatures who calls themselves the Hiltons, who were sworn enemies to the vampires way back before Kain and Raziel. So Kain, he gets defeated by the Sarafan Lord, who is actually a Hilton, took his Soul Weaver sword, and lost his kingdom. And now he wakes up in the future, and some of the vampires sided with the Sarafan, so now he goes around killing vampires who betrayed him and started getting their special ability. And, you know, that's one thing I've been noticing. I mean, if any of you ever played that other video game, Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2, I don't know, every time I played that game, it just makes me feel like I'm playing Legacy of Kain, because you're playing Dracula and you're going through time. I mean, I just have a feeling that Lords of Shadow Part 2 is a lot like Blood Omen 2. But anyway, throughout the game, Raziel got his Soul Weaver sword and killed the Sarafan leader, who's a Hilton, and now finally became king once again, a vampire king. And then that's when they did Soul Weaver 2, where it picks up where Soul Weaver 1 left off, where Raziel thought the human race were noble, decent people, but Kain told him that their gender was the same as vampires. None of them are not exactly holier than thou. And he started to see... I mean, somehow when he was a vampire, he forgot what he was before he became a vampire, because he meets Janos Uldren, the very first vampire who ever lived, and unlike other vampires, Janos Uldren had wings, except they're black feathery wings. Not like what Raziel had, where they're like bat wings. And it turns out that there was a war between the vampires and the Hiltons, and Janos Uldren was in it. And it turns out that the Hiltons had bat-like wings, while the vampire had black feathery wings. So it kind of explained why Kain ripped the skeletal out of Raziel's wings, because they kind of remind him of the Hiltons that Kain dealt with. And he also saw where he saw his past self as a human, and he killed Janos Uldren and ripped out his black heart. So now, in the game, Raziel finds a Soul Weaver sword and start going after his human self. And when he finally kills his human self, the sword itself kept trying to impale himself. I mean, the sword has a mind of its own, but Kain showed up and ripped the sword out of his chest, and now he starts having visions that he never remembered before, because they started time traveling and now time has changed. So now he tells Raziel that the heart must not go back to Janos Uldren, because the Hiltons. And then that's when they created this other game where you can play both Kain and Raziel. And the last game was, of course, Legacy of Kain Defiance. Now, not many people didn't like the game, but it was really fun. And throughout the game, it turns out that Raziel wanted to know where the Janos Uldren's heart is at, and it turns out that Kain has it. Because from the beginning on Blood Omen, when Mortanius turned Kain into a vampire, he didn't become a vampire by a bite and blood transfusion. He became a vampire when he removed the sword out of his chest and put Janos Uldren's heart in his chest, and that's when he became a vampire. So now Raziel kills Kain and gets his heart, but Kain didn't die for good. He was in a swirling fiery vortex which he automatically escaped from. Kind of like how Kratos escaped the underworld on on Gods of War 3. But as Raziel put the heart back on Janos Uldren's chest, Janos Uldren came to life, but he gets possessed by the Hiltons. And now he's creating chaos, especially in the Pillars of Nosgoth. So now, Raziel discovered that he made a mistake. And of course the reason why the sword itself was trying to impale his chest, because he was supposed to emerge himself into the sword of the Soul Weaver. So when Kain discovered what happened, he didn't want Raziel merged with the sword, but Raziel said it's his destiny. He should merge with the sword. And as Kain finally let Raziel merge with the sword, he used the sword to kill the Elder Gods, the giant squid. And now he's ready to end it with the Hiltons by battling against the possessed Janos Uldren and try to put the Pillars of Nosgoth back the way it was. Instead it was all black and shattered. Now he's trying to fix them. And that was the end of Legacy of Kain Defiance. Until they were planning to make a final story that pretty much wraps up everything. I mean, pretty much the final story of Legacy of Kain, which was called Legacy of Kain Dark Prophecy. But sadly, due to the ratings of Defiance, it was cancelled. Too bad. Too bad, because I would imagine what would have happened after Defiance. But there was a lot of lawsuits going on between a couple of ownerships, like Crystal Dynamics and, of course, that other company, which kind of escapes me. And then they started to make other games. There was a short-lived battle game, and it was called Nosgoth. In that game, you choose to be the Sarafan Knights, who are killing and hunting vampires, or you play the vampire clans, who are killing the hunters. That's what it is. Sadly, that game was short-lived, so you hardly ever find that game anywhere. And then there was another Legacy of Kain, which was cancelled. You can only find videos of it. Except this Legacy of Kain did not have Kain or Raziel in it, but you play some sort of demon who can travel between the material and the spectrum realm. You play a guy who gets murdered by some demon, and now you become that demon. And you go around killing people and evil people. And the game was called Legacy of Kain Dead Sun. And now I hear that they're planning to do a remake. I mean, since now I hear they did a remake of Tomb Raider, all three of Tomb Raider's games, and they already remade Crash Bandicoot and Spiral, so I think it's time that Legacy of Kain deserves a remake themselves. So, I gotta say, it's about damn time. And I know some of you are thinking, how come Dracula's not here to do it? Well, I haven't had a touch to my old friend in a long time. But if you, but sometimes... I think he's coming. Yeah, I think Dracula, he's coming. Good evening, everybody. I'm back. What am I wearing? Where did this hat come from? Game insane? Ah, my ring. I was looking all over for my ring. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Dracula is back. And I think it's time for me to wear something more comfortable. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.